Welcome to a short and uninteresting review of the Tenba Fulton V2 16 litre all-weather camera bag. In the UK at the moment you can pick up this camera bag for £100, which is actually a very good deal, and it kind of negates any criticisms I might have of the bag, because I think this bag is very equivalent and actually much more functional than a lot of bags that cost an awful lot more than it. So as you can clearly see, this bag has been quite well used. I've had it about 6 months and I overall really quite like it. I think it's a very decent bag. The only reason that I'm not currently using it as much, and I'm now using a Shimoda Action X50, is just because I'm carrying a second camera setup with me at the same time. For a single setup, for wildlife photography with smaller camera setups, this is a really good bag with a few minor downsides. In terms of size, it's actually a bit of a misnomer them calling it a 16 litre. I'm not actually sure which part of the bag that pertains to, whether it's the roll top section or whether it's the camera section or the bit on the front. It's actually closest in terms of size to about a 30 litre bag. In fact, it's almost identical in terms of size to the Fjallraven large Greenland rucksack, which I'll put up on the screen, because I've previously owned that bag, and it is near identical. It's a very similar size and shape. One thing I do rather like about it is how deep it is. It's quite a shallow bag. It doesn't really waste any space. It's not got any bulk to the bag itself. It's a bit lacking in terms of padding, but for day trips, just as a day bag, I actually prefer that. I prefer a less structured bag because it feels easier to get on and off, and it's not as affected by what clothing you're wearing. So day to day, I think it's actually a very good bag. I think that design-wise, it's quite a nice looking bag. I'm not a massive fan of the black camo effect, and I think it's a bit of a shame that they don't offer the all-weather variant in the olive and teal colorway that they do for the normal bag. I wouldn't necessarily say that the all-weather variant is actually worth it if you prefer the color of the olive one. Being in Wales, I have the opportunity, if you can call it that, to test the weatherproofing of gear, and I can say that this is not weatherproof at all. It does come with a rain cover. You will need that in heavy rain, but the rain here will saturate it quite quickly. So honestly, I wouldn't worry too much. I would, if I was buying it again, potentially go for the olive one and just add a rain cover. I wouldn't necessarily say that the differences between this and the standard version add that much to its weatherproofing. So this rubber section at the front is different with a rubberized zipper. That's all quite good. That actually is quite weather resistant, and if you lay it down on wet surfaces, that's actually fine. But I would say that the material up here is no more weather resistant than anything else I've used, to be honest. And I have found that that can soak through quite easily. And what is possibly the major flaw to the weatherproofing aspect of it is that the zippers around the actual camera section on the back are not the weatherproof ones. And when it's really wet, like it is here quite often, and the water is pouring down your coat, that area is a potential vulnerability. But I would say I've used this in very heavy downpours, and the top section did get a little bit damp before I put the rain cover on it. In fact, I've used it in absolutely insane downpours with the rain cover, and that was totally fine. But I've never had any problems with my camera gear getting wet, and that's all that really matters in a camera bag as to whether it's weather resistant or not. So in that regard, it's good, but don't worry about just going for the all-weather one over the normal one. I think you're going to use a rain cover either way. In terms of what you can get in here, this is actually quite a surprising bag. And one of the things that surprised me is that despite its shallow depth, you can actually fit a gripped camera in. Well, at least you can fit a gripped OM1 in. And I wasn't expecting that. For me, I would say if I was only carrying a Micro Four Thirds wildlife photography setup like this, this bag is pretty much the perfect size. You can fit the OM1 with the 300mm f4 with a battery grip on it, and it just sits quite comfortably in the bag. You can even fit the 1.4 times teleconverter on it at the same time and just fit it all vertically into the bag and still have space next to it. You can actually even fit a second camera body in, but I would say that it doesn't feel like it will take that forever. It feels like you're on the weight limit of the bag then, so I would be careful in that regard. But in terms of the size of the bag internally, it's fantastic. You can fit a decent camera setup in it. The dividers that come with it are very good. I'm quite impressed. It's very good. The bag has a roll top, and this brings me to my second complaint about the bag, if you can call it that. Let's call them areas for improvement. It uses Velcro to hold it together. That's not necessary. They can just do away with that. A hard strip of plastic to hold the shape of the lip, or magnets, would be better. Even if it added £1 to the cost of the bag, I think it's a price worth paying, because this is just, it's unnecessary. And unfortunately, if you do keep things in it that are woolen, like I do, then you have to be much more careful about how you're removing them from the bag. So just as an example of what sort of things I tend to carry in it, I've got like a rain cover. It's not the one for this bag. I can't remember. I put that, a couple of knee pads, and then, you know, a blowy thing, whatever they're called. Loads of woolen things for when it's cold. A torch, even more woolen things. You've got a pretty decent sort of size in it, and in fact I've managed to pack plenty of stuff for days out in it. I don't find it a problem at all. It's got a very capable and expandable upper section. You can indeed fit a 16-inch laptop in the front of this. I have done. I'm not massively a fan of having the laptop access on the front of the bag. I know it's awkward for somebody behind you to open that and lift it out, but I prefer it somewhere else, more internal in the bag. I think they could have instead made the access to the laptop inside the roll top, but I kind of get what they're going for, so it's not really a very valid complaint. And to be honest, their argument about keeping the laptop on the front and not on the back panel of the bag is quite correct. It is uncomfortable when it's slotted into the back panel in bags that take that, like the Shimoda does. Carrying a laptop in that does make it notably less comfortable, and you do worry about flexing the laptop. So I get what they're going for. It's just a personal sort of thing. I prefer having less access to things on the outsides of bags. One aspect that's kind of interesting, I'm not actually sure why I'm holding it like a child on Father Christmas's knee, but it has two different side pockets. This one is quite tough, another bit of Velcro. That is where I normally keep the tripod and sort of strap it on there. The Peak Design tripod fits very nicely in its little case, really convenient. And on the other side is a stretchy water bottle pocket. I do have a complaint about this. You physically cannot remove the water bottle from this when it's on your back. You have to take it off. It's very difficult to get to. I can do that on the Shimoda because the pockets are lower down and they're shorter. I think if they lowered the height of this pocket by just a couple of inches, it would make it easier to get the bottle out while it's still on your back. But minor complaint. The 16 litre did come with a waist strap, but I immediately took it off. It's in a drawer somewhere, I guess. It has no real structure to it. It's more like just a bit of webbing material. And the bag isn't really big enough to warrant using a waist strap, in my opinion. I do quite like how the straps are attached. It feels quite tough. It's not adjustable in any way, but it's held on with sort of seatbelt material. When I did have two full camera setups in this and a tripod and other gear, and it was starting to get up over 10 kilos in terms of internal weight, it was feeling like that was the limit. I wouldn't want to do that long term, and that is why I got a different bag. But for a single camera setup, great. It's very nice. It's relatively comfortable to wear. The straps don't have excessive amounts of padding, but they're actually quite well shaped. You can hook things over this. I use a black rapid strap sometimes that hooks across it. Works really nicely. In terms of the camera compartment itself, it's very nice. It works nicely. This is how I have it set up at the moment. This is a bit of an odd shape. It can take a second camera body in here if needed. Normally I would prefer to have the heavy camera dead center, and you can do that with the provided inserts. This space was where my filters would go. Second camera body, extra lens. It does work quite well. The thing that's missing on this bag, and that would make a huge improvement to it for me and I think for other people, is that there's no accessory pockets of any description on this bag. So a prime location for it would be on this back panel. I think putting some pockets on this panel, on the back panel here, would be a very welcome upgrade, and one that would be worth the extra money that it would cost to add that to the bag design. I think if this was selling for £10–20 more, it would still be such a good bargain and such a good bag compared to others that I don't think that would be a huge problem for them. Well, that's been my brief review of this camera bag. I'm not actually getting rid of this one, even though I've replaced it for my own everyday use, and I use the Shimoda Action X50 for going out with all of my gear. On days when I don't need all of my gear, great bag. If you have a smaller or more normal camera setup than, say, a huge wildlife photography setup, then this is a very, very good bag, especially if you've only got one camera. You've got a few lenses, it'll take a few lenses. It'll happily take an attached 70–200 on a full frame camera. On this it takes a 300mm f4 prime lens because it's a micro four thirds setup. But this is a great everyday bag that I can use for many things. It's got enough space in it to take clothing, you know, coats, gloves, drinks, laptop. It'll take my work laptop, it'll take a battery pack, it'll take a camera very happily. And even though it's not easily adaptable between different purposes, the camera section is fixed, it's not a removable insert. I think it doesn't matter because it's such a conveniently sized bag. And for me, this is a perfect everyday bag if I was carrying a single camera setup. So if I was taking a camera out with me for the day, I was taking my work laptop, maybe I'm working in a cafe, I take this. I like it. So yes, good bag. Needs less Velcro, more pockets, very reasonably priced. Great camera bag. Thumbs up. Thanks for watching. See you next time.